thank you all with our military spouses. We met with Deborah and Sandy and other wives of the Joint Chiefs to get their advice and guidance on how to develop our initiatives, and that was incredibly helpful. We also met with the senior enlisted advisors' wives to discuss what's working in the ranks and what also can be improved. These conversations gave Jill and I just really critical guidance and insight for what would be our subsequent visits to bases and military communities around the country. And as I think back on all the incredible experiences of this past year, and we have had many. I've met the Queen, the Pope. We've done a lot. I have to say that those visits to the military bases have been one of my greatest privileges as First Lady, truly. Through these interactions that we've had, I've gained an even greater level of respect and gratitude for our troops and their amazing families. It is a sight to see. I remember visiting the soldiers and their families at Fort Bragg, one of my first visits with Charlene Austin. We were just talking about that. She hosted me for my first visits. And there I saw firsthand the toll that these wars have taken on these soldiers who have carried so much of the burden of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I will never forget the families that the President and I met at Fort Hood. After suffering such a horrible tragedy, they showed us incredible strength, the strength that binds Army families together. I remember the sailors and their families at Norfolk, and what a thrill it was for me to share their excitement as we welcomed home the crew of the aircraft carrier, the USS Eisenhower, and the hospital ship Comfort. They were coming back from treating patients and delivering health care and humanitarian assistance across the Americas, including Haiti. And as we all know, only after a few short months at home, the Comfort is back in Haiti, along with many other branches of our military, delivering aid with their civilian counterparts, helping the Haitian people, and all the while showing the very best of America and making us all so proud. I remember visiting the airmen and women and their families at Bolling Air Force Base, where some of the pilots and crew had just returned from Iraq. It was their 6th deployment in as many years. I think of the Coast Guard's men and women who will serve aboard the new cutter that I am proud to sponsor, the Stratton, which honors Commander Dorothy Stratton, who led the spars during World War II. Yeah. And I can never forget our Marines, who are a part of our daily lives at the White House in a very special way. And we see them display the same professionalism in our home every single day that defines their service around the world. They are a joy to have in our lives. And then we can never forget our wounded warriors, the inspirational men and women that the President and I have welcomed to the White House, and those we have met all around the country. Unfortunately, for too many of them, the battle continues even after they come home. They are the servicemen that I met at a VA hospital in the Bronx, working so hard to get back on their feet, and in some cases to get back to their units. That's all they cared about. They're the patriots, like the young Navy SEAL who joined us at the Joint Chiefs dinner last week at the White House. This young man attended the dinner with his little sister. I got to sit next to them. She was a nurse who moved to Washington to care for her brother, left her career behind. And he explained to me how he stepped on an IED in Afghanistan and lost both of his legs. Then just 4 months later, he finished a half marathon. The courage, yes. The courage and the optimism of both he and his sister was breathtaking. Their continued love of life and of country was something to behold. And I will always remember all of the wives and husbands, all the moms and the dads that the President and I have met at Arlington on Memorial Day and Veterans Day and all around the country. spouses who've lost their best friend in the world, parents who have laid their children to rest. And as a wife, as a mother, I simply cannot imagine the depths of their pain and loss. Yet every time I meet them, they show a strength and a resolve that always leaves me in awe. Their sacrifice reminds us all that our men and women in uniform, as well as their families, are our nation's greatest military asset. So at every one of these visits that I've had, collecting these memories, my goal has been simple. First, to listen. Listen to those voices, listen to those concerns, listen to those needs. The second goal is to share what I've heard with a team of dedicated leaders who also care deeply about military families, from the President, the Vice President, to Secretary Gates, to Admiral Mullen, to leaders down the chain of command. These people care deeply. And finally, my goal has been to work hard to ensure that the concerns and needs that we hear actually lead to some real change coming out of Washington. Because the quality of the lives of our military and their families means a great deal. Because in the history of our all-volunteer force, we have never asked so much of so few. We've seen the huge burden of 8 years of war on our troops, tour after tour, year after year, missing out on moments that every parent treasures. A baby's first steps, the first words, the day the training wheel comes off the bike, birthdays, anniversaries. We've seen the sacrifices of families on the home front, spouses back home left to do the parenting of 2, juggling playdates and ballet recitals and practices, keeping the household together all on their own, holding down jobs, all the while trying to hide their own fear and worries when the kids look up and ask when mommy or daddy are coming home. And somehow, despite everything that's going on in your lives, military families still find the time to serve others, coaching Little League, running the PTA, making Christmas special for kids with Toys for Tots, volunteering at churches and hospitals, mentoring young people, being role models in your own right. You just keep on serving. Keep on serving your communities, keep on serving this country, and all of you, our troops and families, you do your duty, and you do it without complaint. No complaint here, right? You give your all and ask very little in return, only that we back you up so our troops can do their job. That's why my husband and his administration have worked to do right by our armed forces and their families, to be there for you like you have been there for us, to lighten your load as you have lightened all of ours. Because of your willingness to advocate for change, all of you here, some really important progress has been made in just 1 year. Deborah Mullen has been telling me ever since we met that just like our troops, our spouses also need the very best support and counseling. Many of you share the need to reduce the stress of long deployments and to give our troops more time home between deployments. So this is what happened. My husband heard you and moved to increase the size of the military. That's why his first budget included pay raises and funding for better military housing and more money for child care, in addition to more funds for career development, counseling, and support for spouses. Last year's budget also included money to improve care and treatment for our wounded warriors, especially those with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. And the budget increased made major increases in funding for veterans' health care, including women veterans, plus the largest increase in the VA budget in more than 30 years. And something that I'm especially proud of that we just talked about at the table, the President worked with the Congress to extend the Family and Medical Leave Act to all our military families and to caregivers of our wounded warriors, because just like other Americans, our military spouses need to care for their loved ones without fear of losing their jobs. This commitment to our forces and their families continues today. And I'm happy to announce that the President's 2011 budget that he'll introduce next week will further increase funding for military family support programs by more than 3% to a record $8.8 billion. And this increase is going to include funds for counseling and support for spouses and families, including our Guard and Reserve families, to the tune of $1.9 billion. It includes $1.3 billion to reduce shortages in military child care and to keep our military child care among the best this country has to offer. That's something that I got to see. Because we can't forget that military kids also serve in their own special way. We can't forget these kids.